Previously on Insidious Explained. The original Insidious released in 2010. It focused on the Lambert family, Josh, Renee, and their kids, Dalton, Foster, and baby Callie. One day, Dalton slips into an unexplained coma. Turns out he's an astral projector who accidentally wandered into a spiritual realm of the dead called the Further, and got kidnapped by a red-faced demon. And turns out he inherited his ability to astral project from his father, Josh. As a child, Josh would leave his body in his sleep without realizing it, and the ghost of a serial killer trying to possess his body. So his mom, Lorraine, recruited the help of a psychic, Elise Rainier. She hypnotized Josh to suppress and forget his ability. Now she has to unsuppress it so Josh can enter the Further and rescue Dalton. He does exactly that, but in the process, that serial killer ghost from his childhood ends up possessing his body after all. He kills Elise and in Chapter 2 tries to kill his family. Thankfully, Ghost Elise and her old colleague, fellow psychic Carl, are able to help real Josh defeat the serial killer ghost and repossess his body before he can harm his family. Finally, Carl hypnotizes Josh and Dalton to suppress their abilities and make them forget all about the Further once and for all. After that, there's Chapter 3 and The Last Key, both of which are prequels that don't involve the Lamberts. That changed with Insidious The Red Door in 2023, the first entry to revisit the Lambert family in a proper sequel since 2013's Chapter 2. So there's a 10-year gap. The last entry before Red Door was Last Key in 2018, which was at the time the most successful one at the box office, with a worldwide gross of $167.9 million against a production budget of only $10 million. So another entry was guaranteed, but where to go with it? Leigh Whannell wrote everything from Insidious to Last Key, but by that fourth entry, he already felt like the well was running dry, so it's no surprise he didn't end up writing the fifth entry, though he did come up with an initial idea and drafted a 15 to 20 page outline. Patrick Wilson, who played Josh in 1 and 2, described it to Entertainment Weekly as Dalton going to college and then happens. My character was in it for a little. They pitched it to my agent originally because we had been actively looking for projects for me to direct. My agent said to Blumhouse, "What if he directs the movie?" And they were like, "That's a perfect idea." So then they pitched it to me. Wilson had never directed before, but wanted to try his hand at it. At first, he was hesitant about starting with horror, especially Insidious, because it would feel like trying to fill James Wan's shoes. James Wan, who directed Wilson in Insidious 1 and 2, and The Conjuring 1 and 2. But ultimately, it was too good an opportunity, and who knew when the next would come, so Wilson went for it. But he wanted to do it right. Dalton fighting ghosts in college wasn't enough. He wanted to deal with the fallout from the events of the first two movies. The relationship between Dalton and his father, the hypnosis-induced amnesia, that means Josh forgot everything that happened, while his wife Renee has to shoulder the memories for them both. Clearly, Whannell's original outline didn't include any of that. In another interview with Bloody Disgusting, Wilson said this: "I mean, to be honest with you, when I took the original concept from Lee, which is Dalton going to college, different demons, no lipstick demon, none of that. Josh was in it a little, but not much. No Rose, no family. It's just Dalton. Almost like a Peter Parker story. It followed more of a superhero breakdown, and it didn't feel that engaged to me. As a director, I couldn't see my way in. And as a Marvel fan, I say, release the Peter Parker cut." Blumhouse gave Wilson the go-ahead to take the movie in the direction he wanted, and they brought on Scott Teems to write it. Scott Teems, who previously wrote Halloween Kills. Hey, did you know I interviewed the guy who wrote the Halloween Kills novelization, Tim Wagner? Check out the link in the description. According to Wilson, they spent the next 2 or 3 years writing and finally got the band back together. Patrick Wilson himself as Josh, Rose Byrne as Josh's now ex-wife, Renee, even the same actors who played the children in that first movie, Andrew Astor as Foster, and Ty Simpkins as Dalton. Simpkins, who had a few big roles after Insidious, including Iron Man 3 and Jurassic World. They even bring back Joseph Bishara as both the composer and Lipstick Face Demon, credited as just Lipstick Demon in this one, which admittedly rolls off the tongue better. So, how'd the Red Door turn out? Let's give it a watch. It's been 9 years since the events of Insidious Chapter 2. 9 years since Carl hypnotized Josh and Dalton to forget about the Further and their abilities to astral project. After a brief flashback to that final hypnosis session, we cut to a funeral for Josh's mother, Lorraine. We quickly get a feel for what's happened this past decade. Josh and Renee are divorced. Dalton especially has not taken it well. He mostly ignores his dad, and when they do talk, it's tense. Renee has a suggestion. Dalton is starting college next week. Maybe Josh could drive him. It'd give them a chance to connect.
Nah, he wouldn't want me to.
Renee reminds Josh who the parent is, but Josh just can't bring himself to say yes. As Renee leaves the cemetery with the kids, Josh spots someone who looks familiar. Carl.
Excuse me. Do I know you?
Carl gives a vague answer about knowing Josh's mother, but Josh can sense there's something he's leaving out. Josh gets in his own car to leave and thinks about Renee's suggestion. Maybe he will drive Dalton next week after all. He texts his son and Dalton half-heartedly agrees, and a ghost in orange slowly approaches Josh's car. He doesn't notice. An effective first scare. I appreciate the subtle start without going right into loud jump scares. Keeping the figure out of focus so you don't notice it right away makes it extra creepy, and as it gets closer, it remains out of focus, which maintains the mystery, but also distorts their features. Like, what's wrong with their head? Is that just their skull? Do they have a face? And once Josh leans over to obscure that figure, once he moves back into place, it's gone. After the title card, we see Dalton drawing, first with crayons as a child, then as an adult, more sophisticated drawings of familiar moments from those first two movies, including the iconic shot of Josh with a demon poking out from behind him. It's a clever way to remind audiences what happened in those previous movies without a straight-up recap or previously on Insidious. Not that there's anything wrong with that, it's different for a YouTube video. I appreciate the choice of bringing the family back from the first two chapters. Typically 5 entries into a horror franchise. Maybe you get 1 or 2 characters to come back, but a whole family, all played by the same actors, except Callie, who, to be fair, she was a baby at the time, played by twin babies. It's impressive they were able to get everyone back, and appropriate for this story, because the ending to Chapter 2 never sat right with me. The idea of earning happily ever after by hypnotizing yourself to forget traumatic experiences feels like a cheat. Not to mention half the family will still remember, and that'll create some awkwardness at best. The way Patrick Wilson put it in his interview with Supernova was, I think story-wise, I was really interested in going back to the end of the second film and punching it in the face, like really just going at it. And that's not a knock on how Insidious Chapter 2 ended. I love those first 2 movies so much. I just think dealing with trauma by hypnosis is probably not how we would address things in 2023. A week later, that drive to school. Awkward as always. Dad driving, Dalton doing his best to ignore him, but Josh does get a smile out of him when he asks about the art teacher. Mom says Dalton got the one he wanted. Her name is Armageddon, and she's the best. Patrick Wilson does a good job playing Josh, straddling the line of trying his best, which clearly isn't always good enough, undercut by getting in his own way. When Dalton tells him that Armageddon is the best art teacher, Josh tells him, good job for getting her class. A moment of connection between father and son, before Josh adds a second later,
Ain't you better be with what we're paying.
When they arrive on campus, the differences between father and son become even more apparent. Dalton ignores the fraternity handing out flyers. Josh grabs one for him anyway, and as they unpack, things are tense between them. In their interaction, we also see that it isn't just Josh who sabotages the relationship. When he compliments his son's drawing of Lorraine, Dalton's grandmother, Josh's mother, Dalton turns the nice moment into something else.
Wow, looks like she's
Like she's hiding something?
He isn't wrong. Lorraine was in on the hypnosis 9 years ago and did hide for all that time what Josh and Dalton went through. But of course, there's a better way to broach the subject, and it quickly devolves into another fight where Josh defends his mother, saying she was a single mom who did her best. And with the mood soured, Josh notices that his son has not put a picture of him on the wall.
Guess I didn't make the wall, huh?
So disappointing, I know. Most kids who go to college, first thing they do is slap a big picture of their dad on the wall. To be fair, Dalton very explicitly hangs up drawings of everyone in the family except Josh, and Josh doesn't blame him. He knows he hasn't been too present the last few years. He explains how he's just been a little foggy. He hasn't been able to make time for Dalton or his brother and sister. But at least Dalton has a father. Josh's own father wasn't even around, so it could be worse. They're awkwardly interrupted by the arrival of Dalton's roommate, Chris Winslow. A girl must be a mix-up of some kind. She leaves to speak with housing and get it sorted. Before Dad leaves, one more flub. He hands Dalton that flyer advertising an upcoming frat party, assuring him he's going to have a great time.
You really don't know me, do you? I mean, you really think I want to join a frat?
And that's just the beginning of it. Then comes the confession that Dalton overheard Josh and Mom at the funeral. He knows Dad didn't even want to drive him here. Well, I still did it. Oh, so that makes you Father of the Year now? At least you've got a father.
Stop blaming your dad for the shit that you screwed up. He left. Like 40 years ago. Get over it. God knows I'm not going to be defined by you.
Are you kidding me? After all we have done for you? When did you become this ungrateful little shit?
No wonder Mom divorced you. Thanks for the ride.
So the movie isn't too subtle. You are defined by your father, but I will not be defined by you and perpetuate this generational trauma. The movie definitely wants you to know that Josh's father wasn't around.
A tough go, you know, being a single mom. I'm sorry I haven't been around lately. Of course, my dad wasn't around at all. At least you got a father.
It's like the autopilot in Dark Knight Rises, the one they kept having to bring up so you'd remember it at the end of the movie. Wow, nice Batjet. Just wish we could get that autopilot working. Yeah, that damn autopilot. I do think Patrick Wilson and Ty Simpkins do a good job in their performances, which I'm finding is often the case with Insidious movies. Sometimes the dialogue isn't quite there, but the performances can be strong regardless. Though in Simpkins' case, he unfortunately doesn't get to show much range, because he's really only asked to do one thing: play the stoic loner. Later, Dalton bonds with his temporary roommate. She's stuck here until they find her a new room. In the meantime, she asks Dalton to share something weird about himself, and he confesses that he has no memory of being 10. He was in a coma. They told him it was viral meningitis. All he remembers is waking up one day to find out a year had passed. Chris is a pretty divisive character. Some fans and critics believe she adds fun and charm to an otherwise dour movie. In that sense, she fills the void left by Specs and Tucker's absence. Others feel she's a caricature. Look how quirky I am.
You want to blow my hooter?
What?
Do you play?
Sadly, I fall into the latter camp. She's definitely an archetype, the quirky roommate, which isn't a bad thing automatically, except when a character starts and ends with a familiar trope, and when they're used as a sort of cheat code. Dalton is a loner character, clearly not someone who will open up to just anyone. That creates a challenge if the movie wants him to form bonds in college and reveal some of his character. Or the movie can sidestep that challenge by having quirky roommate barge into the story, interrogate Dalton,
So, what's some weird shit about you?
and force him into the college experience, like making him go to the frat party later. She never feels like a real character, but instead a plot device for Dalton, and a device to police the movie's tone, preventing it from getting too dark.
Please, Father of Dalton, allow me. I clearly interrupted some boy bonding.
At art class the next day, Armageddon makes a huge mistake. She tells her students to close their eyes and count backwards from 10, let their subconscious draw. Clearly, she doesn't know rule number 1 of the Lambert family. Never count backwards near any of them. You're asking for trouble. Dalton ends up drawing a door as a demonic hand grabs him and cuts him, drawing some blood, turning the door red. Elsewhere, Josh wakes with a start from an image of a red door. Like Chris, Armageddon is another trope in place of character. She's so over the top as the pretentious, tough as nails, I'm so much more smarter than you art teacher. She starts off by making a kid rip up his own painting.
Tear it up.
The kid refuses, which means he quits.
I didn't quit. Yes, you did. You just haven't realized it yet. You can go.
She reminds me of David Brent in The Office, trying to be one of those tough, you can't handle it motivational speakers, but there's no actual substance to back it up.
Get out. Go on. I'll open the door for you, yeah? If you don't want to make it, go now, yeah? Save us all a bit of time, yeah? If you don't think you can cut it.
Like David Brent, Armageddon can only offer the most cliched advice you've ever heard about art.
I am not interested in the rules of art. We are going to break the rules.
And ultimately, her role in the movie is just to count backwards from 10 in Dalton's vicinity. Honestly, you could have avoided having a second caricature in this movie by just giving that role to Chris, because it would totally fit her character to just be like, Dalton, I've been studying astral projection. Close your eyes while I count backwards. After the fight with Dalton, Josh has realized it's time to figure out what's wrong with himself. The doctor slides him into an MRI machine. The machine starts, then suddenly stops, leaving Josh in the dark. He hears the doctor's voice say, "There's someone behind you," and the door is open. Suddenly, there's a shadowy figure behind Josh. A ghostly hand reaches for his shoulder. He looks back and sees nothing. Then looks forward again and sees it, a ghost rapidly crawling toward him, and the lights are back on. What the hell was that? The doctor tells him he's been asleep for 15 minutes. Must have been a nightmare then, or you astral projected, but that's very rare. Patients almost never do that. The most effective scare in the movie. It starts with something real, the natural claustrophobia of an MRI machine, turned up once the lights go out. Josh yells for the doctor to let him out, but no one is there. He really is stuck. Once the figure appears and the hand slowly reaches for him, it's all enhanced by that close proximity. Wilson also made an interesting restrained choice. When the figure first appears and the hand reaches out to Josh, there's no score, no sting of, oh no, something scary is happening. Instead, it's just the diegetic sound of Josh breathing and asking for help. The scene started with something real, trapped in the MRI machine, and continues to feel real without the artificial interruption of loud score. We're also trained to expect it when something jumps out, so having not heard that score yet subtly cues you that something scarier is still coming, and I think that actually enhances the tension. Josh looks back, nothing, and finally, the thing crawling toward him. All the more unnerving since Josh can't move and has nowhere to go. Only now you get that loud horror score, but it's a well-earned jump scare. Patrick Wilson told Bloody Disgusting about Lee Whannell's involvement behind the scenes. Lee actually, some of his help was tremendous, because when he was on set and came into the sound mix, he said on one scene, I had music in there, and he would go, you ever try it without it? I said, without anything. He goes, take it all out. And it was just great. It was great because he said, let the audience be the soundtrack. I said, dude, I'm stealing that. That's the greatest response ever. It's so true though, isn't it? We don't know which scene he's talking about here specifically, but if not this one, clearly the same philosophy is at play. The doc checks the scans and finds nothing physically wrong with his brain. The only clue the doc can offer is a question. Do you have any history of mental illness in your family? Might give a clue. In the meantime, he can play matching games to work on his memory. That night, Dalton looks at his drawings of the red door. Then suddenly, the room goes dark. He spots a bloody handprint on his sheets. As he tries to wipe it off, the sheets from the other bed come alive, and Chris finds him tangling with them.
What you doing?
Pretty disappointing after the MRI sequence. This jump scare is a little more traditional and doesn't quite pull it off. Ghost under the sheet just isn't creepy enough, and especially feels like de-escalation after we just saw an actual spirit or ghoul of some kind coming after Josh. Instead, this scene does the opposite of the previous one, relying only on the loud score to make you jump. But good news from Chris. She's been reassigned to the room upstairs. Before leaving him for the night, she spots that flyer on the ground for the frat party and decides they're going. At the party, she has another great suggestion.
This party's lame.
Confirmed. So let's go upstairs and look through everyone's shit.
Isn't invading people's privacy awesome? Well, I mean, they deserve it. They are in a frat after all, and they think they're so great with their exclusive parties. They invited us to the party and offered us free drinks and snacks. Wait, are we the ones who are jerks? While they're upstairs, Dalton meets the unluckiest ghost of them all. He died of alcohol poisoning at this very frat house, and now he's stuck vomiting for eternity. And he adds, "Close the door." Dalton does close the door, then hides under the bed when Nick the frat boy walks in. When Nick leaves, he turns off the lights, which means Dalton is in the dark again. The vomiting ghost walks into the room and crouches to look under the bed, so Dalton crawls away only to find that ghost above him. It throws up all over him. When Chris shows up and turns the lights back on, the ghost is gone. And lucky for Dalton, this is not a Sam Raimi movie, so all the vomit is gone too. It does make you jump, and there's a gross out element, which is a change of pace for Insidious, which usually relies on more traditional, spooky ghosts and ghouls, not bodily fluids, but it's about time. Though a frat party with a baby theme, so a guy in a diaper is walking in and out of the room, and Chris is cracking her jokes, it's just hard to get in the right mood to be truly disturbed.
This is Nick's room.
And this is Nick's butthole cream. I'm gonna go spread this on the communal crapper. BRB.
Why? When Nick comes back to the room and catches Chris and Dalton in there, Chris pretends they were just there to make out and possibly more. When Nick insults her, she kicks him where it hurts and they run. Later in the night, Dalton works on the drawing some more. He fully paints the door red, adds a figure in the foreground, and starts to doze off, which sends him on a trip into the further. With no memory of what happened the last time he astral projected 9 years ago, Dalton doesn't know to be careful. Instead, he wanders upstairs to Chris's room. Isn't invading people's privacy awesome? What is with these stalkers? He plays her melodica, an instrument she likes to play. Isn't she so quirky? The sound startles her awake and she says, "Where's my mayonnaise?" Isn't she so quirky? Of course, with Dalton on the astral plane, he's invisible to her, but when Dalton leaves, she sees the instrument drop and the door swing shut. Dalton runs back to his body downstairs, while followed by some kind of sniveling creature. Then a knock at his door. It's Chris wondering what the hell is going on, and Dalton explains everything that's been happening. I actually appreciate for a second seeing what the further might be like for someone who doesn't already know how terrible the place is. In chapters 1 and 2, we hear about Dalton wandering the further in his sleep thinking it's a dream, same with Josh when he was a kid, but we never see that carefree version of astral projecting. We only see the aftermath when people visit the further on rescue missions with the get in, get out urgency. This is the first time we see one of those accidental visits, where at first there's some fun and freedom to wandering outside your body. On the other hand, there is that lack of urgency, and by this point, nearly halfway through the movie, it starts to feel like a lack of momentum in the plot. If you think back to the original, there was a clear need. Dalton is in a strange coma. How do we save him? And soon it becomes urgent. They learn that a demon is trying to take him, and if they don't rescue him soon, the demon will have him. Here, it's a lot more generic. My dad and I keep getting jump scared. But Josh and Dalton already seemed pretty sullen before the movie began, so the hauntings just feel like one more problem to throw on the pile, versus the original, where you could really feel Renee becoming more and more isolated and desperate as the hauntings escalate. There was urgency to save Dalton, and additionally urgency to rescue Renee from the things going bump in the night. There was desperation as she struggled to convince Josh it's all real. On the supernatural front in The Red Door, the only sense of urgency comes from knowledge we bring into the movie externally. Based on the premise and marketing, we assume Lipstick Demon is coming back. Otherwise, the plot is mostly driven by the drama, a father struggling not to become estranged from his son, but there's been little movement on that front other than just establishing it as the current status status quo. So far, the movie feels less like a story being told and more like a few loosely connected scare scenes, which range pretty wildly in their effectiveness. The next day, Josh finds the door to his late mother's room open. Downstairs, on the doctor's advice, he plays a memory game by taping pictures against his window, then seeing how quickly he can find all the matches. As he removes and rearranges them, a figure in orange appears in the window, the same one we saw through the back window of his car earlier. As he flips the images, it gets closer. Suddenly, it crashes through the window and chases him upstairs to his mother's room. He pushes Josh into the closet, knocking him for a moment into the further. He wakes up with a box in his hand marked Ben Burton. The build-up for this scene is great. The idea of Josh playing the memory game with photos on the window is a creative way to make that process more tactile. It gives Patrick Wilson more to do physically and provides more room in his performance to show the frustration of finding your mind falling short. Which is good, because Josh doesn't actually have a lot to do in this movie. He's on his own for so much of it. Really makes me miss the dynamic between him and Renee in the original, which is the last time we had it, because in Chapter 2 he was possessed the whole time. And of course, the window matching game is a great excuse to repeatedly obscure and reveal the outside world, for that trick of Orange Ghost getting closer and closer, which actually only happens twice, but I always remember it as way more. Once the ghost crashes through the window and it becomes a more generic chase, it's less effective, and honestly the way it ends makes me laugh. I get that it's supposed to be like the ghost uses his ghostly powers to send Josh to the further, but it comes across like the guy gently shoves Josh, and he's like, "Ah!" and crashes into the wall so hard it sends him to another dimension, like Specs who almost dies after a decaying Josh, possessed by an elderly serial killer, gently shoves him. Not the first time I've brought that up, and it won't be the last time. Sorry, Specs, I'm not going to let you live that one down. In art class, more impromptu hypnosis, leading to a flash of a memory. Dalton fighting his own dad, who he doesn't remember was possessed by a serial killer at the time. Meanwhile, Josh opens the Ben Burton box to find photos of a man with his mother, Lorraine. Turns out Ben Burton is Josh's father, the ghost in orange who has been reaching out, and apparently he spent some time in a psychiatric hospital. That night, Dalton does more work on his drawing. The figure in the foreground is becoming clearer, a man with a hammer. Also, Chris has done some poking around on the old interwebs. Her words, not mine. Oh, you don't believe me? Okay, you asked for it.
So, I started poking around the old interwebs.
Turns out Dalton is an astral projector. How does she know? She learned from a YouTube channel called Spectral Sightings, run by a couple of guys, you might have heard of them, named Tucker and Specs. And they watch an old clip of a lecture from a woman named Elise Rainier, describing the further, how it's a dark realm filled with tortured souls of the dead, some doomed to repeat the worst mistakes of their lives over and over, which for me would be the time I challenged the popular kid in high school to TI-83 plus Tetris. Back in the day, you could connect two graphing calculators like Game Boys and actually play games against each other. I thought it would be my moment to shine. Time for the nerds to rise up and finally win against the jocks. But turns out, jocks aren't like they are in the movies, where they're good at sports and they're popular, but it's fair because they're also dumb. No, it turns out they are better at everything after all. So, yeah, he was really good at basketball and also Tetris. Life is not fair. Elise goes on. The dead crave life, so if you astral project, they are drawn to your presence, and the further you travel, the riskier it becomes. They want life, and they can come to our world to get it. I found the Tucker and Specs cameo fun and organic. They would be on YouTube and easy to find with the right search terms, which begs the question why Dalton didn't try this himself. He does try calling his brother Foster, who doesn't want to talk about red doors. He says to just ask Mom, but after that, the best Dalton can come up with is to stare at his own painting. He doesn't think to poke around the old interwebs until Chris does. What is wrong with him? Do they not have internet in the further? Guess Josh isn't the only one whose brain is falling short. By the way, listen to how Elise starts her lecture.
So I'm here to talk to you about astral projection and the further. Okay, give me a minute here. 3, 2, 1. The further is a dark realm filled with tortured souls of the dead.
Why did she count down like that? First off, how irresponsible. She of all people should know if anyone happened to have their eyes closed, counting down would have immediately hypnotized them and possibly sent them to another dimension. But also, how weird would it be for someone to introduce themselves, introduce the topic of their lecture, then count down before actually starting the material? 3, 2, 1 is what you say before launching into a performance or monologue, not informative teaching. It makes it feel performative, like she needs to make sure she strikes the right ominous tone while describing the further. That'd be like if you had bad news for someone, but you were afraid of sounding too jovial while telling them. Like, how's Elise doing, by the way? Oh, you didn't hear? What happened? Oh man, it was crazy. Actually, hold on, I gotta get this right. 3, 2, 1. She was strangled to death by Josh, who was possessed by a serial killer. Okay, how'd I do? What the hell are you talking about? Why did you count down like that? Dalton has an idea. The vomiting boy said, close the door. Maybe he didn't just mean the bathroom door, but really he meant this door, the one Dalton drew. He has to know. So they head back to the frat house to ask the ghost himself. They find a dark room. Dalton closes his eyes, and Chris counts down from 10. I love how easy hypnotizing has become in this franchise. And it turns out to be a huge mistake. Entering the further draws the presence of something. In the physical world, the lights go out, and something invisible strangles Chris. In the further, Dalton sees what? A certain red-faced demon. One he doesn't remember, but we sure do. Dalton rushes back to his body. It's the demon from the first movie. You know, what's Darth Maul doing here? Lipstick-faced demon. I'm surprised you forgot. As Dalton wakes up, so does Chris, thanks to the frat boy Nick doing chest compressions on her. I like that it turns out Nick isn't a total jerk, even after they snooped around his room and she kicked him in a spot that really hurts. He doesn't let her die, which is admittedly a low bar, but a typical horror would have used him as fodder for a gruesome kill, like they usually do with jerks. Though on second thought, it might have helped raise the stakes, because this movie sorely needs them. It's so plotting at this point, just waiting for something more to happen than a few jump scares. And revealing Lipstick Demon doesn't cut it. Our familiarity with him undercuts how scary he can be. Maybe if he made a big statement upon his return, like I said, perhaps by killing someone, which would be quite unusual for this franchise, and actually set the stage for a grander finale, things are more dangerous than ever. Instead, he just kind of almost hurts someone who I really don't care about as a character, and honestly, again thinking about danger and urgency, it feels like everything would be fine if Dalton just leaves well enough alone. Stop astral projecting. Everything was fine until Armageddon counted backwards from 10. She's the real villain in all this. Elsewhere, Josh does some digging into his past, or specifically his father's past, and finds out he was put in a psychiatric hospital in 1978, diagnosed with schizophrenia after claiming he could astral project. Then he died after jumping off the roof. This isn't the first time the Insidious movies have struggled to recreate the sense of mystery that was present in the original with all those questions. What happened to Dalton? Why are we being haunted? What the hell is the further? By movie 5, all that's gone, but frustratingly, it's only gone for us, not the characters. They have literal amnesia, so we wait for most of the movie for them to catch up. That can work as a story, but of course it's far more challenging to tell that version of the story effectively. Insidious Chapter 3 deals with it by crafting new mysteries. Yes, we're ahead of the characters, and that we know about the further, but we don't know what the hell this thing is. She's got no face, or hands, or feet. That's crazy. And why can't that guy breathe? The Red Door tries to muster up some mystery by asking the question, who is Josh's father, and what's his deal? But that feels like a manufactured question. We have no real reason to wonder, and if we did, we'd figure it out. We know Dalton inherited astral projection from Josh, so yeah, chances are Josh's father could do it too. At that, Josh pays Renee a visit in search of answers. Finally, Renee is back. Rose Byrne is great, and she had a lot to do in the original movie. I was so bummed that she had nothing to do in 2, but run up and down the stairs a few times before a ghost could smack her unconscious so possessed Josh could sniff her. And now, Sadly, she has even less to do in this movie, but at least she's there, I guess. Dalton searches for answers too, by calling his younger brother Foster again to see what he remembers from their past. Dalton mentions the new addition to his drawing, a guy with a hammer. Foster remembers that. He's had an image in his mind for years. Mom always said it was just a bad dream. But Foster remembers Dad attacking them with a hammer. Dalton finishes the drawing of that man, and sure enough, it's Dad. Speaking of Dad, Josh tells Renee he's been seeing his dad, his dead dad. How is that possible? Is he crazy? The day he jumped, Ben left a note for Lorraine which says, "This ends with me." "You're not crazy," Renee assures. And she finally tells him everything about astral projection and the further, and about the hypnosis that suppressed his memories. That's why he's been foggy all this time. Josh is angry. Renee knew and didn't say anything. Why? An argument threatens to boil over until she cuts through the tension with another revelation. Why? Because you tried to kill our family. She knew it wasn't really Josh, but the kids couldn't understand. Foster had night terrors, and Renee had no choice but to lie to their kids for a decade. The memories aren't real. It's just their imagination. Dad would never hurt you, and that is what tore them apart. I enjoy the complexity of this scene. Josh is angry that his memory was suppressed and he was lied to. Who wouldn't be angry? At the same time, he was complicit in the original decision. At the same time, he couldn't know about the brain fog side effect he'd have over the next decade. It's a good, meaty conflict that could be mined for a lot of drama, could have given Rose Byrne more of a role. Unfortunately, it's pretty much all relegated to this one scene. Josh packs his things to leave when Foster shows up. Dalton sent him a picture on his phone of his drawing of angry Josh with a hammer in front of a red door. Foster tells Josh and Renee that Dalton has been having nightmares and visions. It's around then Dalton decides to get answers of his own. Once again, he astral projects. But stop doing that! Though before he can astral project of his own will, Lipstick Demon gets to him first. We see the demon blow out a metaphysical candle, making the lights go out in Dalton's room. Then Dalton enters the further with a cool effect where the hammer from his painting is suddenly real. He ends up on a literal trip down memory lane. One of my favorite features of the further: time travel. This time, he ends up in the basement during Chapter 2, when Dad was attacking them. While Dad tried to break into the basement, Child Dalton closed his eyes to enter the further and try to get real Josh back. While Child Dalton's body was unconscious, Josh got into the basement, and turns out there was something we didn't see in that movie. He grabbed a hammer and tried to attack Dalton's unconscious body. The boy was only saved because an older, time-traveling Dalton tackles Josh now. A cool, but like some of the other time travel twists, entirely unnecessary addition. In Chapter 1, the door to their house mysteriously opened, and Chapter 2 explains how. In Chapter 2, there was no mystery in this scene. The movie just invents that there was a close call we didn't know about, but don't worry, a time-traveling Dalton took care of it. Then, in a flash, Dalton is back in the Lipstick Demon's workshop, where he was previously held captive as a child 9 years ago. And in the physical world, his body is possessed by that demon. And I gotta be honest, Dalton, I feel like if you tried, even at all, you could escape that cage. It's basically just a loose pile of chairs. Also, did I gloss over the fact that after all these years, Lipstick Demon has finally possessed Josh? Yes, I did, because nothing interesting happens at all with that possession. It turns out all the demon wanted to do all this time was stare at a wall and menacingly drool. He does also telepathically shove Chris at one point, but he's so ineffectual. To the extent we're invested in Chris's fate, it's hard to believe she's ever in any real danger anyway. At Renee's house, with Foster's arrival and the news of Dalton's visions and nightmares, Josh himself has decided to enter the further. Why? It feels intuitive to the audience because Dalton is in the process of getting kidnapped by Lipstick Demon, but Josh and Renee don't know that. All they know is that Dalton drew a picture of Josh with a hammer. Why from that do they leap to, guess it's time to visit an extra-dimensional realm of the dead again, you start to get an idea why this family has had so much trouble all these years. They think the further is the answer to everything. Maybe before that, I don't know, maybe try calling Dalton, see if he's okay. Maybe fill him in on the truth like you just did for Josh. But the movie needs Josh and Dalton in the further. So here we are. Josh looks for Dalton and ends up at his dorm room where he sees his physical body possessed. He's got to find the real Dalton, but how? He wanders the dark until time travel. He spots himself from the first Insidious carrying child Dalton out of the demon's workshop. Going back the way they came brings current Josh back to that workshop, where he frees current Dalton from his chair prison and his chains. Back in the dorm, Dalton's body goes limp now that the demon has vacated it. And that's when things get a little creepier. Ghosts crawl out from the dark and start grabbing at it. Presumably now that his body is an empty vessel, it entices spirits who want to live again, echoing the first movie. Josh and Dalton run out of the workshop and through the red door, but the demon tries to break through. Someone's got to hold it shut. Josh volunteers. He holds it shut while Dalton rushes back to his body. Holding the door saps Josh of life, but perhaps it's a worthwhile sacrifice. This ends with me, he echoes his father's words, and appears at peace as his heart slows to a stop. Except maybe there's another way. Dalton returns to his drawing of the red door and paints over it. In the further, Josh sees it having an effect. Paint covers the door. Josh's heart starts again. The demon breaks a hand through the door and stares at Josh, but it's too late for that demon. He and the door are shrouded in darkness as Dalton finishes the job. The exact mechanics for how a demon is defeated in Insidious has never been all that satisfying. It's always more about the emotional payoff. Typically, the reunion of a parent and their child. Josh and Dalton in 1, Josh and Dalton in 2, Quinn and her mom in 3, Elise and her mom in Last Key, and Josh and Dalton in The Red Door again. Sure, it's repetitive, but enough time has passed since 2 that despite this movie's shortcomings, I did enjoy the emotional payoff, which largely relies on my residual investment in these characters from the first movie. In terms of how they actually defeated the demon, I just take it as Dalton and Josh have psychic abilities, but no real ability to wield them intentionally. Dalton inadvertently opened the red door simply by drawing it and remembering it, so painting over it has the opposite effect, pointing his ability and harnessing it toward that end, trapping Lipstick Face in the further. All that's left now for Josh is to go home. But how? He calls for his dad, and he answers by offering a lantern to guide him out. In the physical world, Josh wakes up. His phone rings with a call from Dalton. He's doing okay too. In the coming days, things get better for the Lamberts. Josh is more present, and this time they plan to keep it that way. No hypnosis-induced amnesia, just remembering the past even if it hurts. After Josh's latest visit to Renee and the kids, she tells him next time he can come a little earlier if he wants and join them for dinner. Outside, he runs into a woman he knows but can't quite place, Elise Rainier. "I know your mother," she says. There's so much Josh wants to tell his mother, and Elise promises he will someday have the chance. Until then, he and Dalton have bright futures ahead. A moment later, she's gone. Josh pays Dalton's dorm a visit and appreciates his latest painting. Josh with a young Dalton in his arms, carrying him out of the darkness of the further. As a closing image for at least the Lambert story within this franchise, that is an effective one to end on. A father rescuing his child, and it takes on new meaning now. First, it represented a literal reunion, Josh finding his son in the further, and now it doubly represents a reunion in the present, both a physical but also an emotional one, as they've begun to move past their differences and understand each other. And on top of that, it leads into Josh performing a heartwarming musical number, kind of. A cover of Shakespeare's Sisters' Stay plays over the credits, performed by Ghost and Patrick Wilson on vocals. It's a great cover. Patrick Wilson is a fantastic singer who got his start with Broadway musicals. He's actually a producer on the current Lost Boys musical. Awesome end credit song aside, the ending does suffer a little from the same issue as Last Key, where legitimate personal issues are sidestepped and resolved by the supernatural conflict. Like, mending a broken relationship between father and child is difficult, but not when the realization is, oh, it wasn't his fault. In Last Key, a demon made him abusive. In Red Door, oh, hypnosis-induced amnesia made him absent as a father. In both cases, the performances and score sell an emotional payoff, even though it's not entirely earned. There's a moment where Chris tells Dalton to get rid of his drawing of the door, now painted over, but he insists on keeping it, saying, forgetting it doesn't work. We need to remember, even the things that hurt. And that's the message of the movie. I think that works, especially as a payoff to the end of Chapter 2 with the whole amnesia decision, but I think it would have landed more effectively if this movie found a way to explore that idea through at least in part a natural dramatic lens, instead of just a largely supernatural one. For example, if we got a better idea of how Josh's brain fog actually manifested and drove him away from his children. Instead, we only hear about it and see the aftermath once they're already well on their way to being estranged. The bigger issue? It's just not a very scary or compelling movie. 5 movies in, it's lost a lot of the mystery, intrigue, and creativity that made a simple house haunting story fresh. Actually, this movie did less with the further than any previous entry, and even in the ones I dislike, seeing the weird and surreal stuff in the further always brings me at least some enjoyment, so I definitely missed it here. I'd be curious to see Patrick Wilson direct again, because I do think he did a good job with this movie, but it's hard to tell given its shortcomings in the foundation, the actual story and writing. Now, if you stick around after the credits, you do see the light above that painted over red door flickering and turning back on. Guess those doors don't stay closed forever, and we knew they wouldn't because the red door set a new box office record for the franchise, making $189 million worldwide on a budget of 16. So those doors are opening again with the upcoming 6th entry, Out of the Further, which looks like it has found a new spin that could make things feel fresh one more time. In this one, a character finds out they have the ability to bring entities from the further into the real world. I'm so curious to see what that means exactly. Like, once a ghost or demon is in our physical reality, can you shoot them? What happens if a spirit is dragged into the physical realm and killed again? Can they die twice? I'm so curious. Can't wait to find out. Be on the lookout for my review of that movie once it's here.